Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket stands as a masterclass in authenticity, where every rifle, machine gun, and grenade launcher tells its own story. The entire film was shot in England, meaning every piece of military hardware had to be sourced or faked to look like the real Vietnam War. Let's break down every weapon you see on screen. Full Metal Jacket is really two movies welded together. The first half takes place at Paris Island in 1967, where recruits drill with wooden stock rifles and learn what it means to be a Marine. The second half drops you straight into the Tet Offensive in early 1968, where the Battle of Hue turned city streets into a nightmare of snipers and urban combat. This timeline matters because 1967 to 1968 was when the US military was transitioning from one main rifle to another, and the film captures that change. Kubrick loved control. Instead of flying crews to Southeast Asia, he built Vietnam in Britain. The production team transformed the Beckton Gasworks in East London into a war-torn city, brought in palm trees, and painted British helicopters to look American. They even got their hands on real tanks to give the battle scenes weight and movement. These choices explain why certain guns show up on screen and why some look just slightly off if you know what to look for. The rifles tell the story from the beginning. In every Paris Island sequence, you see recruits carrying the M14. When they're running the bayonet assault course, when they're standing in formation reciting the rifleman's creed, when they're on the range learning to shoot, the M14 is there. The camera even gives you a close look at one when Private Pyle is discovered in the bathroom with a loaded magazine. Those rounds are 7.62mm NATO Full Metal Jacket bullets, which literally gives the movie its title. The M14 was adopted back in 1957. T fires that big 7.62 by 51mm NATO round from a 20-round detachable box magazine. The rifle can shoot semi-automatic, and some versions can go full automatic too. By the mid-1960s though, the military was already pushing it aside for something lighter and more modern. The M14 stuck around in training and in some units through 1968. For Paris Island in 1967, having recruits drill with the M14 is completely accurate. The Marine Corps built its whole identity around rifle marksmanship, and the way Kubrick films the M14 captures that. Fast forward to Vietnam, and suddenly every Marine is carrying a different rifle. These are the black rifles, the M16 family, with their 20-inch barrels and modern look. Look closely though, and many of these rifles are missing something. On the right side of the rifle, there should be a forward assist button, a little plunger that lets you manually push the bolt closed if the gun jams. A lot of the rifles in the movie don't have it. They're smooth on that side. These are actually Colt Model 604 rifles, which were made for the US Air Force, not the Marines. The Colt Model 604 was an early M16 without the forward assist. It kept the original receiver design. Kubrick's team probably used these because they could get them through British Armory channels, and because for most shots, viewers won't notice that missing detail. Freeze frame and really look though, and you can spot a few rifles that do have the forward assist. Those are XM16E1S, the interim Army and Marine Corps rifle that added that feature before the fully standardized M16A1 came along in 1967. Then there's a third type of rifle you'll see, but only in the background when nobody's actually firing. These are MGC replicas. MGC, or Model Gun Corporation, made metal replica rifles in Japan that could fire caps for movie productions. They were used all over 1980s films. In Full Metal Jacket, they fill out the ranks when the scene doesn't require blank firing. You can identify them by the forward assist that looks molded into the receiver instead of being a separate part. Auction houses have confirmed that MGC replicas from this production still exist. The film uses these rifles in ways that match real history. Look at Cowboy's rifle and you'll see something called jungle-style magazines. Two 20-round magazines taped together base to base. When one runs dry, you just pull it out, flip it, jam the fresh mag in, and keep shooting. This was real field practice during Vietnam. Marines did this all the time because it gave them a faster reload. Then there's the jam scene. When the squad is pinned down by the sniper, Joker's rifle stops working at the absolute worst moment. He's forced to switch to his pistol. This scene captures real history. Early M16s in Vietnam had serious reliability problems. The military changed the ammunition powder, didn't chrome-line the chamber and bore at first, and didn't train soldiers properly on cleaning the weapon. Guys were dying because their rifles jammed in firefights. By the time the M16A1 was standardized in 1967, Most of these issues were fixed, but that history lives in this one tense moment in the film. Marines in 1968 would have mostly carried M16A1s with the forward assist, not the slick-sided Air Force 604s. Using 604s as stand-ins is just reality for a 1980s production filmed in the UK. The film even sprinkles in some XM16E1s to add variety. The MGC replicas are a production necessity that eagle-eyed viewers can spot once they know the tells. The sniper's rifle gets misidentified constantly. At the climax of the film, the squad is being systematically torn apart by a sniper in the ruins. The shooter is a young woman, and most people remember her using an AK-47. Freeze the frames though, and you can see a Czechoslovak SA VZ-58. The receiver has these distinctive milled lines and the magazine has a different geometry than an AK. The VZ-58 fires the same 7.62 by 39mm round as an AK, and it looks similar at first glance, but mechanically they're completely different. It uses a short stroke piston with a tilting hinged locking piece. It doesn't share a single part with the Kalashnikov family. Czechoslovakia adopted it in the late 1950s, and it showed up in conflicts all over the world through Soviet supply chains. The North Vietnamese Army, the regular troops, did use VZ-58s alongside AK pattern rifles. The Viet Cong, the irregular guerrilla fighters, would have been less likely to have them. The VC often carried whatever they could get: SKS rifles, captured American M1 carbines, old French weapons left over from the First Indochina War. The film calls the sniper VC, but given the uniform and the context of fighting in Hue, a lot of viewers read her as North Vietnamese Army. Either way, the rifle is correctly identified and shows Eastern Bloc variety beyond just AK clones. The M60 machine gun shows up in three major places.
First, the infamous Dorgunner séquence.
A helicopter lifts Joker and Rafterman to the front, and there's a gunner in the door hosing down the countryside with an M60, yelling about leading targets. On the ground, Animal Mother practically becomes one with his M60. He's always feeding belts and charging through streets with that heavy gun. During the base attack at the start of Tet, Joker helps man an M60 on the defensive line. The M60 is a belt-fed 7.62 by 51mm NATO general-purpose machine gun. The US military adopted it in 1960 and all the services used it. Vietnam troops nicknamed it the Pig, partly because of its weight and partly because it ate through ammunition so fast. The weapon could be shoulder-fired for short bursts, fired from a bipod, or mounted on vehicles and helicopters. Vietnam imagery is dominated by this gun, and the movie leans into that iconic status. M60s were standard issue in Marine rifle platoons and on aircraft. The door gunner scene is carefully staged around how the M60 worked when hung from aircraft doors. The way Animal Mother carries it and fires it while moving through urban terrain reflects how gunners actually used the weapon in combat, even though it was brutally heavy. Another machine gun shows up if you look at the tanks. As the M41 light tanks rumble through the background or trade fire in the distance, you can catch the silhouette of a Browning M2 HB.50 caliber mounted on the turret. These guns aren't the focus of any scene, but they anchor the background action and sell the idea that you're watching a full-scale combined arms battle. The Browning M2 has been in service since World War II, firing the massive .50 BMG round. In Full Metal Jacket, it rides on those M41 Walker Bulldog tanks. The M41 was actually more associated with South Vietnamese Army use than US Marine Corps armor in 1968, but Kubrick's production could acquire M41s and operate them safely on set. That's part of building Vietnam in London. The tanks give the scene weight, and the .50 calories on top add to the chaos. A grenadier in Cowboy's platoon carries the M79 grenade launcher throughout the Vietnam sequences. When the squad tries to suppress the sniper, when the column moves into Hue, you can see this break-action weapon being used as portable artillery for the platoon. The M79 was adopted in 1961. It fires 40mm grenades from a single-shot break-action launcher. Troops nicknamed it the Blooper or the Thumper because of its distinctive sound. It could throw high explosive, smoke, buckshot, and flechette rounds out to 300 meters or more. That kind of indirect lofted fire is exactly what a small unit wants when they need to hit enemies behind cover or across a street. The downside was that a grenadier carrying an M79 couldn't also be a rifleman, which is why under-barrel launchers eventually replaced it. For 1968 Marines, the M79 is completely accurate. It was standard issue in that period, and the film shows it being used in its natural urban combat role, lobbing grenades into buildings and down streets where direct fire won't reach. The M72 law shows up during the sniper fight. One Marine extends a single-use M72 law and fires it at the suspected hide. In the ruined blocks of Hue, where rooms are punched open and lines of fire run straight down streets, that's exactly how a law would be employed. Made to attack fortified positions and enemy firing points. The M72 is a telescoping single-shot 66mm rocket with a heat warhead. The Army and Marine Corps adopted it in 1963 and used it throughout Vietnam. Once you extend the tube, which also cocks the firing mechanism, you aim and fire it like a very light rocket launcher, then you throw it away. Effective range against point targets is about 200 meters in trained hands. Marines in 1968 had M72s at the squad level, and using one against an enemy in a building was standard practice even when the target wasn't an armored vehicle. The film shows the M1911 A1.45 caliber pistol as Joker's secondary weapon. In the Sniper Alley climax, he draws it when his M16 fails. After Rafterman wounds the sniper, Joker uses the pistol to finish the scene's grim moral decision.
10 mirror real practice.
Marines working as correspondents or in certain leadership positions might have had access to sidearms, and the 1911 was the U.S. service pistol from World War I all the way into the 1980s. Completely appropriate for the era and for Joker's role. Grenades show up clipped to Marines' flak vests throughout the film. The most prominent ones are M26 fragmentation grenades, sometimes called lemon grenades because of their oval shape. The M26 series replaced the World War II pineapple grenade and was widely used from Korea through Vietnam. You'll see them clearly on Cowboy and on Joker when he gets chewed out by a colonel. There's also the M67 fragmentation grenade, which is less obvious in the film but still present. The M67 is the spherical baseball grenade most people recognize today. The late 1960s was a transition period where both the M26 and the M67 were in service. Marines in Hue could have had either or both in their kit, and the film showing the M26 prominently is period appropriate. Now here's something weird you might miss completely. In a few shots, a character named Crazy Earl has the stock of a lever-action air rifle poking from his gear. A Daisy Red Ryder BB gun. Yes, the classic BB gun from A Christmas Story. Gustav Hasford's novel The Short Timers gives Earl the same quirk, and the film keeps it. A low-velocity lever-action BB gun that's been in production since 1940. The inclusion is pure character texture, a sardonic, almost nihilistic commentary on the boundary between play, training, and killing. Matches Kubrick's bitter sense of humor perfectly. Vehicles directly affected which weapons show up on screen. Because Full Metal Jacket builds Vietnam inside London, the vehicle choices matter for small arms realism. The helicopters you see are actually Westland Wessex helicopters, which are British-built turbine-powered derivatives of the American H-34 family. Painted olive drab with U.S. markings and M60s on the doors, they read as Marine helicopters in fast-cut sequences. The Wessex has a longer, more angular nose than a real Sikorsky H-34, which gives it away to aviation enthusiasts, but for most viewers it works. The M41 tanks in Hue give the production moving mass and justify those Browning M2HB heavy machine guns we glimpse hammering away from turrets. The real Battle of Hue featured a complex mix of U.S. Marine armor, South Vietnamese armor, and supporting vehicles. The M41s on screen were what the production could get and maintain in England, and they do the job of making the battle feel real. The grenades show the M26 still hanging around on flak vests with the M67 coming into service, which is exactly the late 60s overlap you'd expect in a frontline unit. There are details worth looking for on a rewatch. Those jungle-style magazines with two 20-rounders taped together on Cowboy's rifle speed-up magazine changes. You flip, insert, rack the charging handle, and you're back in the fight. Common practice in the era. Animal Mother's M60 becomes a character prop. He straps it high on his chest and often fires from the carry position. Cinematic, but gunners did fire short bursts while moving. The door gunner sequence with the M60 works especially well in fast-cut air-to-ground shots, where the gun is the character and the helicopter is just set dressing. The M1911 pistol shows up as a true backup weapon. The sniper scene demonstrates exactly why officers and some specialists valued a .45 on the hip even in a rifle war.
When the long gun fell, you draw.
That daisy red rider stock in the frame becomes impossible to unsee once you know about it, poking from Crazy Earl's pack. A dark joke lifted straight from Hasford's novel. Behind-the-scenes sourcing affected what you see on screen in major ways. The production used MGC replica M16S extensively for non-firing shots.
The fake forward assist is your visual tell.
Then for firing scenes, blank converted Rayall rifles appear, often in the Model 604 pattern. UK helicopters and armor were readily available. Westland Wessex helicopters from Royal Air Force and Royal Navy stock could be painted and dressed as US H-34S. M41 Walker Bulldogs were obtainable and maintainable, giving the set team the ability to stage convincing armor infantry movement. The decision to shoot in East London and at Bassingbourn Barracks let Kubrick stage complex gun choreography with the same small circle of armorers and extras over long periods. That kind of slow-cooked precision was exactly what he preferred. Production histories confirm how the team transformed the Beckton Gasworks into a convincing battle zone. Viewers sometimes ask why they don't see under-barrel grenade launchers like the M203, or widespread 30-round M16 magazines. The M203 wasn't standardized until 1969. 20-round magazines dominated in 1968 combat. 30-rounders existed, but weren't the norm that year. The movie's look matches period photography, and the M79 fills the grenadier role accurately. If you want to spot the props on a rewatch, pause on marching columns or long walk and talk shots. Many of those rifles will be MGC replicas with a fake forward assist and no cycling action. Firing shots will cut to blank adapted real rifles. Freeze the snipers close-ups to identify the VZ-58 by its charging handle and receiver profile. Look at the helicopter nose. If it's long and angular with a prominent intake bulge, it's a Wessex dressed as an H-34, not a real Sikorsky. Tank-top machine guns show you the M2HB on an M41, a UK-friendly armor choice that reads correctly at speed.
Kubrick never juste pu a gun in sommeonness and without meaning something by it.
The weapons are props in the theatrical sense. They prop up his themes. The M14 ritualizes identity. In Paris Island, discipline strips away individuality. The rifleman's creed gets chanted like a prayer, the bayonet run becomes choreography, and the wooden stock becomes part of the body. The M16 mechanizes alienation. In hue, the rifle is black, anodized, modular. Magazines tape together, guns jam at terrible moments, and the soldier's relationship to the weapon is more clinical, less romantic. Kubrick showing modern war as an industrial system.
The M60 embody raw aggression.
Animal Mother's belt-fed monster, heavy and bellowing and relentlessly fed, personifies fury in motion. Kubrick frames him with ammunition belts snaking across his chest like totems. The M79 represents controlled violence. The grenadier measures arcs and angles, a solitary artilleryman pacing the squad's rhythm. The M1911 becomes a moral trigger. When Joker's M16 fails, the old .45 pistol becomes the instrument for a decision the film refuses to sentimentalize. Crazy Earl's Red Ryder BB gun turns childhood into something grotesque, running straight through Kubrick's view of militarized adolescence. For anyone who cares about war movies, getting the guns wrong kills immersion fast. Wrong weapon, wrong time period, wrong way of using it. Full Metal Jacket avoids those mistakes. The M14 to M16 timeline is accurate. The M60, M79, and M72 ensemble is textbook. The VZ-58 is an unusual choice for the adversary rifle and arguably more interesting than just another Chinese AK clone. Where the film compromises, using Model 604 rifles and MGC replicas in places where purists would want a Marine M16A1, most viewers won't notice and the story's authenticity never suffers. Kubrick's film gets remembered for the drill instructor's blistering tirades and the haunted performance of Private Pyle, but the weapons vocabulary does a lot of the story's heavy lifting. How the M14 becomes a ritual object, how the M16 becomes a machine, how the M60 becomes brute force, how a single-shot M79 sets a squad's tempo. Once you factor in UK production reality, the gun work is remarkably sound. The few liberties taken are practical compromises that serve the film. Full Metal Jacket proves you can build Vietnam in London and still get the details right where it matters. The weapons tell their own story, from boot camp rifles to jungle machine guns to that final moment with a pistol in hand. Every choice serves the narrative, and every detail adds up to something real.